Thank you all for coming out today. Appreciate it very much. Appreciate the opportunity to come to Edison and talk to you all about what I think is the most important fiscal issue that faces our state and, candidly, our country from here forward in the 21st century. And I want to thank the mayor for welcoming me to town, and I look forward to working with her on a number of these issues that are extraordinarily important to her municipality, your municipality, and to the people of our state. Let me just tell you how all this is going to work. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the issue of pension and benefit reform, and then I'm going to stop, and we're going to have microphones set up, and I'm going to take questions on that issue or any other issue that you all have on your mind and want to talk to me about today. Let me give to you first the depth of the problem that we have, and I'll deal with the pension system first. Now, promises have been made over the course of decades by politicians who preceded me in New Jersey to public sector workers regarding pensions. And I'm not going to judge whether those promises were made in good faith or not, but the one thing we know for sure is what the current condition of that pension fund is. Under the very best estimate that can be made that benefits the state the most, the pension system is currently $46 billion underfunded. When you think about that number, it's $46 billion underfunded. To give you some perspective on that, the entire budget of the state of New Jersey for this year, for everything that state government does, is just a shade over $29 billion. We're $46 billion underfunded in the pension system. And you will hear the argument that will be put forward by any number of folks that the whole problem here is that the state has not been making its payments over the last decade to the pension funds. That has contributed to the problem. But it is not the whole problem or even close to the whole problem. Let me explain to you why. If the state were today to begin making the payments it needed and actuarially was required to make, but did nothing else to change the pension system, but we made all those payments, $3+ billion a year, for the next 15 years, we would go from $46 billion underfunded to $85 billion underfunded. If we extended out even further to the next 30 years, if we made all the payments we were supposed to make for the next 30 years, we would go from $46 billion underfunded to $181 billion underfunded. Now, what's this tell you? What it tells me is that the problem, the main driver of the problem here is not the fact that the state is not making its payments. We need to make our payments, and we will. But if we do that and we don't change the system, we are just feeding a voracious beast that will never stop its hunger for taxpayer money. And so we need to do both. We need to reform the system, and we need to reform it directly and quickly, because every day that we allow to waste is another day we move closer and closer to insolvency. And, you know, people throw around words like insolvency, and some people say, well, you know, does he really mean it? Let me explain to you the condition I inherited this state in. During the transition in late December, I was presented with a document by one of the financial advisory companies that advises the state that told me that if I did not take immediate action when I get into office to freeze spending, that by the second pay period in March of this year, New Jersey would not have been able to meet payroll. Think about that. Those who work for the state, those who we purchase products from, we would not have been able to meet payroll. And so what I did when I first came in office was to immediately, within the first 3 weeks, freeze $2.2 billion in spending to bring John Corzine's budget that he left me into balance. So when I talk about insolvency, we were merely weeks away from insolvency if we didn't act and act quickly. And you'll remember at the time, perhaps, that the legislature, the Democratic leadership in the legislature said, oh, look at the governor. He thinks he's Julius Caesar, acting without our permission to freeze spending. Well, first of all, they challenged it in court and I won. Secondly, we've been waiting for them to act for how long to bring spending under control? If I waited for them, believe me, we'd be bouncing checks all over New Jersey. Or they would do what is their most favorite thing, which is to raise taxes on all of you in order to fill that gap. And so we didn't raise taxes in 2010 to fill the $2.2 billion gap. And for the fiscal 11 budget, we had an $11 billion budget deficit that we inherited from the Corzine administration. And we filled that budget gap without any new taxes or any increased taxes on the people of the state of New Jersey, who are already the most taxed people in the United States. Now, we have to bring the same type of common sense to this problem. A lot of the cuts that I made in the budget this past year were difficult ones, and ones to worthwhile programs that I care about and that you care about, that affect your families or friends or neighbors or all three sets of those people. It is not easy to do these things, but ignoring them is no longer an option. We can't ignore them. So let's talk about what we need to do and what I propose specifically as to pensions in the state. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds on this, but there are 5 different pension systems. And we'll just talk about them by category, and then we'll leave that. But you need to know it because there's different reforms for each system. There's the Public Employees Retirement System. That is for all of the state employees, the state public employees, and some municipal employees, non-law enforcement. There is the TPAF, which is the Teachers Pension and Annuity Fund. That's self-explanatory. There is PFRS, which is the Police and Fire Retirement System. Again, self-explanatory. There's SPRS, which is the State Police Retirement System. Again, self-explanatory. And finally, there is the JRS, which is the Judicial Retirement System. Again, self-explanatory for the judges. So you have 5 different systems. Those 5 systems together make up that $46 billion in underfunding, steaming towards $85 billion in the next 15 years. So here's what we're going to do. First, to show you that I acknowledge, recognize, and understand that this is not a partisan issue. The problems in the pension system were accelerated in 2001 by a Republican legislature and a Republican governor that passed legislation and signed legislation that increased the pension benefits of all of these folks by 9%. They identified no way to pay for it. It was a complete giveaway. And the first thing that my proposal says is that 9% increase has to be taken back. We have to take back that 9% increase. There's no justification for it, no way to pay for it, and it was purely a special interest giveaway. Second, as to teachers and other public employees at both the state, county, and municipal level, we have to do some common sense things. First is to increase the retirement age to 65. There's no reason why people shouldn't have to work until age 65. Right now, people who have put in 25 years of service are eligible for retirement. We would suggest we move that from 25 years to 30 years of service. And we would adjust the penalty if you decide to retire early. We would take that from 2% to 3%. So you would lose 3% for each year that you retire early and take that penalty up from where it is now. And we would also have a fairer calculation of the benefits. Right now, the benefits are calculated based on the 3 highest years. The concern for that, of course, is that that allows for the gaming of the system. Somebody could be working at a certain salary for most of their career, and then through political connections or otherwise, they get a big salary for those last 3 years, and their pension is not based upon what they've been contributing for the first 22 years, but for what they collect in the last 3 years. So we extend that to say it should be salary over 5 highest years. It gets a lot more difficult to game the system when you spread it and average it over 5 years than over 3 years. And those would be very significant changes and produce significant savings for the system. Next, as to police and fire and the state police. And all of these reforms, by the way, would apply only to employees who have less than 25 years of service. Because once you get to 25 years, you now own that pension. You've vested in it, and we can't take it away from someone once they own it. So this is under 25 years of service. Now, I think we would all agree that police and fire are a markedly different type of career than other government jobs. We don't necessarily, I think, want, and this is with all due respect to some of our senior citizens out there, but I don't think we want 65-year-old people chasing criminals down the street. And with some rare exceptions, I don't think we want people 65 or older climbing into burning buildings and putting out fires. It is a younger person's profession. And so as a result, their career span is shorter, and so the benefits need to be different in order to compensate for that, because we don't want them on the street that long. Currently, a police or fire personnel with 25 years of service can retire with a 65% pension, 65% of their salary. We would propose that you go to 30 years of service in order to get that 65%, and if you want to retire 25 years, that drops down to 60%. And also, right now, those pensions are calculated based upon the highest year of your earnings. Now, often what happens in this profession is the same thing that happens in the other that I talked about, is you go at the end through some help to get that one highest year, and your pension is calculated off of that, not off of the 24 years that you did before. So we would change that from the current system to salary over the highest 3 years. Again, to spread it out over a long period of time to squeeze the way folks could potentially game the system. For all active employees right now, and this would be for all the systems, there's varying levels of contribution by the employee. From a high of 8.5% in the police and fire, 8.5% of their salary contributed every year to their pension, to a low of 3% for the judges. This proposal would bring everybody up to 8.5%. Teachers right now are at 5.5%. Other public workers are at 5.5%. State police are at 7.5%. This would bring everybody up to 8.5%. So 8.5% of your salary would have to be contributed to the pension fund. This would also bring significant relief to the system.